So my first question is about like your cover art. I couldn't figure
Okay.
out what like the paintings were. Like if it
Mm.
was like Greek stuff or like Renaissance stuff or like what. Like I had
So
no
that
idea.
no worries. That's actually it's kind of like a mix, right? It's like a lot of the stuff was made kind of in the 18th century, but some of it depicts like just older like Greek legends or things like that. I think believe one of the album artworks is like Aphrodite and things like that. So it's like I try to pull from those kinds of sources. I think the visual is just really strong. I've always liked that style of like visual, and I think it really does help, especially when you're telling a specific story in your song. I think it does a really good job at like conveying that and pulling somebody in. I'm a big fan of like album artwork like that.
There was one song, it was like my light source is gone. There was one
Oh,
song, Chasing Light, right? And it was about Icarus. Not about Icarus, but like referenced. And I
yeah.
was wondering if it like the paintings that you choose, like do they all kind of in a way reference?
Yes, I try to kind of make it match that way. So like chasing light is literally about like trying to chase somebody I kind of like would call them like a son. I was somebody. It's based on a story of me being in love with somebody who definitely didn't reciprocate it, and kind of like being burned by that. Like putting all your all into it, and then kind of having it burn your wings by trying, and then you know what I mean. It's like that whole thing. So the Icarus reference definitely was on purpose. Um, some of them are a little bit more like open. Not everyone is like nailed. I do try to like nail it each time, but like I do try to. I think, for example, the most recent song that I released, "Baby Blues," the album artwork for that is kind of like a maiden kind of giving her flower to like a knight. And so that's kind of like the idea of like that song of like someone kind of giving you their love while you're away, and kind of the scandalousness of like being that person sometimes. So that one's a little bit more like I said, more open because it's not as direct, because the song is definitely more about like kind of infidelity and being that other guy. But the giving of like grace from a maiden to a knight is like kind of the idea.
Thought that that was really interesting that you like introduced or like kind of gave like where it came from, like where the songs were coming from, like and your headspace and stuff like that. Um and I was just wondering how important you thought like being vulnerable and open like that is with like your audience to an extent.
It's actually really important, and something that I'm trying to really get better at as I've done this. I've been doing. I was a bunch of different aliases before I was the Mellow King, and it's very funny how you like learn how to kind of advertise yourself in a sense. Like, obviously I'm advertising the musical side of me, which I do have to do a better job at. But as everyone kind of like figures out what they're doing. But again, being able to relate to people, being able to like grasp a story, that's really important. And it's something that I learned through trial and error. Is something that people, even if they haven't heard of you, will kind of like take a moment. Sometimes being too lengthy can be a detriment, but people who really want that story, that little bit of like more with like their artist, or like a song, or just any of their like content that they like devour. You know what I mean? They basically just consume. And yeah, it's important to kind of just relate to people. And I've never been super good at that. I'm not the biggest people person, but I've just kind of learned to just kind of put that to the wayside and just do it. And the response was really, really positive. So it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm going to do this, but now I have to do it. I'm going to do it like a different way. You learn how to like almost tell that story, but present it in like new ways to your audience. And I find that to be very fascinating.
Um so as a creator of beats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like a favorite thing that you've sampled, or like have you ever sampled something like really specific for like a really specific reason?
Yes. I'd honestly say uh, I've given like a few cracks at certain like samples, like in the amount of time that I've learned. And yeah, I think the most I'd have to re-release these like beats, but there's one that I did that samples like the Hedgehog's Dilemma from Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I fucking nailed it the last time, and I was like, yes, like that was a really cool feeling. And so doing stuff like that is really really fun. It tends to be like video games, not usually for any specific like like it's not going to be like, oh, this is what the song is going to be about, but sometimes like I love something so much, and sampling is kind of like an amalgamation of like a bunch of different styles, a bunch of different things, and based on the producer, you'll get a little bit of their personality and a little bit of like their tastes and interests outside of like the musical realm sometimes too. And I think that part of it's super fun to interject, especially like whether I'm passionate about like the things that I love, whether it be anime, whether it be video games, and all the things I do outside of that, the musical realm. And it's cool to be able to kind of almost like bridge them for a moment, even if it's not like, I don't expect to hear it in like the soundtrack or anything like that at some point for the next few dozen remakes that they do in the future. But regardless, like I'm very much just like if I can capture that in that moment, I think I've done a pretty cool job.
So I listened to Still Here. It was actually my first time listening to that song. And that's why I asked the question about it. You guys were talking about going through tough times and stuff like that. And like overcoming it. And I was wondering how music helped you get through times like that, or like if it helped you get through times like that, in what ways?
Absolutely. We would not be here today if it wasn't for the plethora of different artists that I've gotten into, whether it be hip hop, whether it be other things. And yeah, it's so funny to like think about it, because it's like everyone can say music is important to them, and then they have a hard time like contextualizing it or wording it. And for me, it's like it's hard to explain it because it's so much a part of like who I am. I've always made music. I've always been in love with music, and it's like hard to imagine my life without it. And so I think the biggest way that it's helped me, especially in different times in life, is that it helps you feel seen. It helps you feel like you belong, like you're not going through A, B, or C, whether it be a breakup, whether it be some kind of like bout of depression, suicidal thoughts, that kind of stuff. Like all of that can like you can find something that relates to it, and then you feel a sense of belonging, and it helps you it eases that pain. It helps you move forward. It's not the cure to everything, but you can definitely like learn. But you can definitely like, there's something really gratifying about like when you're in that mode, when you're really sad, and you hear a song that like hits you a specific way, and it like it's saying exactly like what you're feeling, and like you may cry, you may like respond in an emotional way, but that's not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing to have a moment or a space in order to kind of release that emotion and feel okay afterwards, and still here is definitely about that, because I feel, especially like now, like after being out of it, that no one really talks about, like everyone talks about being in it and all that stuff, and it's really really hard to kind of talk about like what it takes to actually like get through it, because like it's always someone speaking from like a perspective of like everything's good, and like it's never like in between. It's never like what it actually is, which is a lot of hard work, and you're human, and sometimes you'll do good, sometimes you'll do bad, and it's just like that process. And so the fact of still being here, it's not so much like a negative thing where it's like, oh, I'm still here. It's like, no, I am the stone in the wind, in the storm, and I'm still standing, even though it's whether I'm weathered a little bit, I can still push through and see the light at the end of the tunnel.
That was profound.
Love it. Now that's a transition.
Do you ever look back on when you like first started making music, and like if you could say anything to yourself back then, do you know what you would say?
Nothing is perfect, and don't ever like wait for an opportunity to make things perfect. I think that's kind of something that I still have to get better at myself to this day. That like, it's a process, and everybody that's ever released like music, it's so funny as like an artist, especially making music, we always compare to ourselves to people who have like the teams and the videographer, and to basically just have all the resources they need in order to like do what they're doing now. And it's hard to imagine like them being in the position that we're all in, but all of the musicians we love started somewhere, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's really important to just keep consistent, keep doing it. Don't stop. Don't tell anybody. Don't let anybody let you like. Don't let anybody like skew you away from your vision, especially like artistic visions. I like a part of me like likes to think that like I wasted time sometimes with like trying to do things a certain way when it's not the case. It's just we all have a different way of doing it. Like my 64-bit Wanderer stuff was very, very like artsy and very like all the posts had to be specific to telling a specific story about this character. You know what I mean? Because I wanted to do something that I didn't necessarily have the resources to do, and I'd made the best of it of what I will. But instead of looking at it like it's a waste, I've certainly grown to like see how that kind of vision is really important to have. And so I like to have that and like interject it in ways for the Mellow King without being too contrived and too like confusing. So stuff like the album artwork, stuff like that, where I feel like I can tell a story in a different way or kind of pull from that like super artsy like side of me that I just love. I love just sometimes just doing things just to do them in terms of like the art, because it's it's for me. At the end of the day, it is for me. So it's like it's easy to kind of get wrapped up in the idea of like it needs to be like this or like this, or it needs to appeal to this or this. It's just don't worry about any of that. Just release music, release like the behind the scenes stuff is stuff I'm still trying to like figure out and do properly. But yeah, let people in. That's really what it is, and like people will gravitate towards you and your vision if you stand by it. So that's definitely something I would pass on to my younger self.
This is my last question.
Okay.
It's only been 24 minutes. I feel like that's too
Hell yeah.
short. But this is my last question. It's not anything deep or profound. It's just like, when are you dropping music?
When am I dropping new music? That is honestly, I've been sitting on it and waiting. But I am currently working on a project. I'm either gonna make it a full album or like a mini album, or I'm gonna make it like two separate EPs. I'm kind of like sitting on it, but like how inspiration is. It comes in different ways. And when it comes to making a full project, as to doing singles, I like to have like an idea and a story that I can tell. So I'm kind of in that mode of still formulating it, or like making it like laying it out, writing, making the roadmap. But I'm honestly thinking either in October or towards the end of the year, maybe. That is like when I'll start releasing like new singles that will lead to this tape. I might even like reuse like older songs and clean them up, but we'll see. Like I'm very much like trying to like figure out exactly which way I'm going with this story. But I'm really excited for the future, because it's kind of how we talk about like perfectionism and this, that, and the other. Kind of letting go of that and kind of understanding like, okay, if this direction is the direction I want to go in, and executing it and actually nailing it is an amazing feeling. And so to share this next round of music, it's like basically everything I've made up to this point has led to this point, and it's yeah, really exciting. I'm super pumped. So I'm gonna get the posting train started first. I gotta get better at that. Be like, I exist. I am an artist that is real, and then kind of go from there. But yeah, I'm very excited. So new music by at least Halloween, if not the end of the year. But it's gonna lead to a full project, not just single. singles anymore, which is going to be super good. I'm really looking forward to it.
We love that.
Sensational.
Sensational indeed.
Spoken like Future would, man. Spoken just like
Exactly.
Future.